We live in a constantly connected world, yet people have never felt more disconnected. You're watching Bullyproof, where we shine a spotlight on workplace bullying, today's silent epidemic. Research indicates that 75% of workers will either be a target, witness bullying, or both. I am Linda Duberley, your host. I'm a mindset and performance coach, best-selling author and technology executive. In today's episode, we are going to look at the dangers of social media and online gaming and how to keep our children safe online. And I'm joined by a parent who is going to share her story of her son's addiction to online gaming. I'm delighted to welcome Linda Duberley as my guest today. Linda is a news presenter, media trainer, and award-winning journalist. During her career, she has worked for major broadcasters including ITV, Fox News, CNBC Asia, and Sky News. Her unique and comprehensive approach to media training includes presentation skills, behavioural analysis, coaching in public speaking, and business performance. Her magazine River Tribe, published to 45,000 people in Richmond, went online when COVID hit. It focuses on well-being and empowerment. She supports a range of charities, including the Victoria Foundation, for whom she is an ambassador. TVF supports young medics to take up frontline jobs in the NHS. So I'm going to jump over to Zoom now to have a chat with Linda. I hope you enjoy it. Linda, welcome today. I'm so delighted to have you with me.
Hi, Mary-Lise.
So I'm going to fire straight away and ask you to tell us a little bit about you and what gets Linda out of bed in the mornings.
Well, I guess life gets me out of bed. I've always been a journalist since I was a very young woman. I was 19 when I first went to the Western Mail. And the reason why I became a journalist is because I wanted a front seat in watching life unfold and sometimes in watching history unfold. What I think I do, Mary-Lise, is I try and get up very early every morning, 6 o'clock. But on the recommendation of a very, very good life coach I met, I take the first half hour literally to think about life, to think about the challenges of the day ahead. So sometimes I take a longer look at my life, but each day I think, what can I knock off my list today? What can I achieve? And I think that gives me a sense of power and dynamism, I guess, as I begin to work.
Amazing. And I've loved something you've said to me before, is it's about making your whole life work. And I think that spirit of waking up in the mornings and thinking about your life holistically and being intentional and thinking about what can I do today is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think that it's not just about your actual work, your career, although I do think there's enormous fulfillment to be had that way. But I do think it's about your whole life. It's about your close friendships, your family, sometimes your advanced hobbies, your beliefs, your values, and not neglecting other sides of your life aside from work. So when I do media training, alongside that, sometimes I do some personal development coaching, and I do quarters. I say what it is your job, your advanced hobby, your beliefs, and your family and friends, the circle that you exist within, the circle that makes you tick.
Oh, I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And today we're going to talk about something which is perhaps a hard topic to talk about, but it's so important for my viewers and listeners to hear this and to hear your story. So that I'm all about finding your roar. So thank you for roaring today and sharing your story. But this is about your son Connor and the challenges that he had as a teenager. Would you mind just sharing a bit of a backdrop of that story?
Okay, so I have 3 children, and I make no secret of the fact that they are my world, if you like. I've been fortunate enough to do some fantastic stories in my life, but my children are by far the most important thing to me. So when something goes wrong, I'm immediately on it, I hope. Someone once said to me as well that you're only as happy as your unhappiest child.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is very, very true. So when this whole scenario started rolling out with my eldest boy, I was very, very worried. In fact, I didn't really notice anything was wrong because he became very quiet. He was in his room. There were none of the normal teenage tantrums. He wasn't out, you know, with a bottle of cider, getting drunk with his mates. He wasn't really doing anything wrong. So in the initial stages, I didn't know anything was up. And the irony was, at the same time early on, I was doing several stories for ITV's Tonight with Trevor McDonald, where I was literally researching depression in teenagers and actually cyber addiction issues without realizing what had started to go on in my own home. So I traveled to the very first cyber addiction unit in Holland. Interestingly, the Sunday Times has just done one about a centre starting here, and that's only last week. And that's 10 years after they set one up in Holland. I travelled to the University of Chicago, where they actually teach cyber gaming design as one of their degrees. And yet I hadn't noticed. In fact, the person who drew me to realise what was going on was Connor's dentist. And he called me in and he said, I think something's really wrong. And I said, what do you mean? Obviously with his teeth. And he said, he's got a lot of cavities. Now, normally I would talk to a young teenager and they would start stamping and screaming and, you know, saying, I do brush my teeth and, you know, putting up a big fight. And he just stood there and said, I know, I just don't care. And he said, I think you will find that there's an element of depression in there. I want you to try and get some help. And it took a long time to get help. But bear in mind, I had access to the guys in Amsterdam, to other addiction experts that I'd done as part of the many social issues I'd covered for Tonight with Trevor McDonald. And I still found it difficult to handle the situation in which I found myself. And I know that there are thousands of parents then and now, probably millions, who are in the same position.
So Linda, wow, that's so incredibly powerful, and I've got 1,000 questions in my mind, but I really wanted to sort of zone in on that moment, that pivotal moment when things started to change. What happened?
I could see that things were kind of rolling out of control, and Connor was going to a school which certainly had some challenges. It was one of the last Jesuit schools left in the United Kingdom. And I think that he was bullied by a teacher there. I think that they lost control of the situation. In fact, they excluded him without really having any meaningful conversations with me. We moved him to another school nearby, which had a very unusual approach. And I credit that school with actually being able to get him back into the confines of an academic situation. The real turning point came when we sent him to a school, a college in central London called MPW. And I remember the Mr. Keddy, I remember the name of the teacher who started to help him on a one-to-one basis to write essays properly. In fact, history was one of his A-levels. And I knew that he started to trust adults, to trust figures in authority again. And gradually he could rebuild the situation brick by brick. And it was by no means a quick turnaround. I often compare it to a Williamson turn, which is when an ocean liner has to turn around in the middle of a big stretch of water. But I can remember walking across the concourse at Waterloo Station and the phone going, and it was Connor's principal. And I can remember, I didn't know what this was, but my vision started to shake a little bit. I know now that that was probably a high blood pressure spike. And I was so nervous about the phone call. And all I can remember is him saying, we think there's been a transformation. We put your son on the highest possible trajectory for university entrance.
Wow. Powerful. That is incredible. And I know you're very proud of him today and for how he's turned his life around.
Yeah, he went to university. I mean, I was up all night waiting for these results, and he got to do economics at the University of Essex. He was then, and I remember where I was when I heard all of these messages. It meant so much to me. But he was awarded a £10,000 grant in order to mentor and coach younger students, and so he did a master's with that money in this country. And then he was chosen by his university to be an ambassador and go to the University of Constance in Germany, which has a fantastic master's program in behavioural economics. He now is an economist with the government, and not between you and me, because let's hope loads of people listen. He won promotion just this week, and he's been put on a fast track list. So he has transformed his life, and make no mistake, he did it.
Yes, of course.
He did the heavy lifting, and I am very proud of him.
And I love that, because I'm all about how do you take adversity and how do you turn that into your superpower for success. And I literally think that it's the tough challenges, you know, the real trauma, the real suffering that we go through in our lives that can really catapult us to become our own kind of superheroes in our own story, you know. And I think that Conor is such a fantastic example of that, where he's not only bounced back from that adversity, but he's also kind of bounced beyond, you know. I kind of have this image of Buzz Lightyear in my head. We can go to infinity and beyond. I think that's so powerful. And I think, you know, for any mother who have an experience like that with their children, I think the big lesson that, you know, you've just kind of highlighted, that you've learned, is that he had to do the work. He had to want to get better. He had to want to change. You couldn't do the work for him. I think that's really important, and maybe we'll come on later to talk about some of the advice that you will give to parents. Before we do that, though, I just want to pick up on you mentioned bullying, that bullying was sort of a catalyst for him getting into that sort of cyber addiction and depression state. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I didn't realise it was going on to start with, but he had this real fear about going to school. And one of the things that did happen is I found him sitting in the pouring rain one day on a park bench because he wouldn't go to school. I found him wrapped up in a blanket and sitting inside a closet in the house when I believed he was at school. And I knew that there was a real fear. And the problem was, amongst other things, his treatment by a particular teacher. Make no mistake, he made great friends at that school, but this destroyed his faith, I think, partly in authority, in authoritative figures in his life. So several things happened at once, and I spoke to many psychiatrists and psychologists about this, but it was kind of a perfect storm where his father and I got divorced, we moved house, he had a bad traffic accident, it left him with an impairment, which is now largely cleared up, but that altogether pushed him into a terribly fearful state. So what I want to say as well is the cyber game wasn't a violent game, it was a kind of almost holistic medieval game built around a guild, and he had a character in the guild which gave him a sort of safe haven, and it gave him some standing within the online community. And when you play those big multi-role combat games or competitive games, they're real people. They're real people all over the world playing them. So he felt safe within that community. And that's why he stayed in that community, because that's what gave him his haven. In fact, when he left, I can remember him coming up, knocking on my bedroom door, kneeling down by the bed and saying, I've decided to leave. I know that I have to break out of this because I have to try and succeed now. And he was kneeling on the ground, and he was clearly scared to leave because he had to actually leave a particular relationship with a real person. And he sold his character for £500, and he could have gone upwards to 2,500. I mean, these games are really, really advanced. They are, in fact, very creative, and they can be very useful. He still plays these games, as do his brother and his sister, but it represented this haven for him, which kept him away from other things that he could be achieving. So he left, and then he decided that he was just going to push on up the mountain.
Wow, incredible. And so what does an addiction, a cyber addiction look like? Like what is it like on a day? What is a day in Connor's life at the kind of the worst time? What did it look like?
Well, he would be on the game for like 14, 15 hours, and he wouldn't leave the room. He would eat in the room, and he would stay in the room, and that was part of the attraction of the game when you're going through incredibly anxious periods. And the problem is, as I've said, it means that you can't achieve anything else. Everything else, your health, your mental well-being, your ability to achieve at school or with your real friends, not your virtual friends, goes by the by.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the lack of sleep. How many hours did he sleep, for example?
Very few, and that is quite damaging.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very big downside, because that has all sorts of knock-on effects. But one of the good things is and he put on a lot of weight, because if you're eating rubbish all the time, you can put on stones in weight. And he was transformed by university. I mean, he literally came home one term, and I was with a friend in my house, and he was standing in the kitchen, and I said, Connor's home, and he's, there's a group of his friends here. She walked over to him and said, could you just go and get Connor for me, because I'd really like to say hello. And it was Connor. She didn't recognize him.
Wow.
And I think that's just incredible, because it's like a downward spiral is very difficult to deal with, but an upward spiral is also has its own momentum. Yeah. Once one good thing happens, another good things, and another good thing. And so you just need to get on that track. You just need to get on that upward spiral.
And I love that, because I mean, that's kind of what you said in the beginning about getting up every morning and thinking about what can you do to do, because it is about, I always say to people, it's baby steps, and it's about also getting yourself into that energy where you focus on what you have achieved and not what you haven't done, because we are so quick to focus on the things that we haven't actually achieved, aren't we?
Yeah, and he's very, he went with his father to Australia when the bushfires were on, and he came back and he said, right, I got to do something. So he found the Cool Earth charity, and he did 150k round Richmond Park on his own during lockdown, and raised £1,500 and just pushed the money over to the charity. He's someone that believes in the possible. Yeah. He's a very, very impressive young man now. He's interested in going to conferences. He's interested in finding out about life. He is a godfather to a little girl. He loves his circle of friends. They live all over Europe, and he always supports the charities that will back a cause that means something to him right now.
And it must be so wonderful to sort of any parent out there listening or watching, to actually realize that, whatever pain your child is experiencing right now, or challenges, that they can and will get through it. And, the art of the possible, as you say, he believes in possibility. I think that's the big deal here in terms of helping your child see that, and supporting them along the way, not trying to fix them. I think that's the key thing.
And I think I remember interviewing someone I regard as one of the greatest addiction experts in the country, Robin Lefebvre, who ran the Promise Centre in Kensington. I interviewed a couple of times. And you start young. I mean, you have to love your child, like really love them, as we all do, I'm sure. But you have to take your own ego out of the situation, and you have to concentrate on what's best for your child, and with other siblings as well. And if you do that, and you form the right kind of attachment with them when they're babies, then that will give you the groundwork. It will hopefully give you an unbreakable thread, so that when you do hit the road bumps, which are inevitable for everyone, that line of communication is strong enough to help you power through various difficulties. But it starts at birth. You have to form a really healthy, strong attachment with your baby.
And I think, especially for new mothers, I think that is, I would say, new working mothers. I think often we, you know, and I've certainly had this experience myself, you know, having my children fairly young as a career woman. There were lots of tensions going on for me around, you know, always focusing on wanting to go back to work. And in hindsight, I was just like, actually, you know, I was just meant to be with my baby at that time. And I sometimes I think, oh, I should have just enjoyed it more and connected more. And there's no point looking back, I know, but it is, you do the best what you can do in the time, at the time. But I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe that sort of I think the first 5 years, as you say, are the sort of the forming years.
They're really critical. I don't think it matters whether you work
Yeah.
outside the home or you don't.
Yeah.
It is about your relationship with your baby and sowing the seeds
Yeah.
so that there's something in the emotional bank for when you've got to spend stuff later on. That's it's if you think of it in terms of a transaction, you know, you might get that right. It's not about having the right bedroom or the right baby blanket or the right designer gear or the right pram or the right this, or heaven forbid going to the right school that's on the right list, or eventually the right university that's a Russell Group university. It's about your relationship with your baby and then your relationship with your child.
Yes, I love that, and I want all the working mums out there with young kids to really listen to this and to really embrace that. I think that's the crux for me, is that sort of, I love the thinking about it as a emotional transaction and putting some in the bank for when you're really going to need it. I love that. Really love that.
Yeah, and it's all about time. What your child wants is your time and your attention and your care. And it doesn't matter that you're not with them if you're out at work, provided you carve out the right amount of time for them, provided you prioritize them. You work, okay, but then they are the very next call on your time. And when things go wrong, they're the first call on your time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. So, Linda, I'm conscious that there might be some parents out there listening, and feeling like, you know, this is me. I'm going through a really challenging time with my child right now, and you know, there's some form of addiction in some way, shape, or form. What are some of the red flags, first of all, that you would advise us to look for?
I think it's not really the rebellious, loud behaviour. It's withdrawn behaviour that can signal a very serious issue. So I would always watch for that. It's not that I would watch for signs necessarily, but it's that I would continue building the kind of connection you should have with your children. So, and as I said, that starts when they're very young. So the golden rule is, don't stop talking. Always communicate with your children so that you know what's going on. And Connor's brother said to me once that Connor believed all the way through that no matter what was going wrong, he knew he could always come to me and talk to me. And it's true that you know, we all make huge mistakes. I can think of so many I've made, but each of my children will call me when they have a problem. They'll call me immediately and they'll talk it through, no matter 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, which they have done. I will still talk to them, and I will try not to put my view on top of them, not to put my ego into the equation, but to try and put myself into their shoes and try and find a solution. So the withdrawn behavior is a very, very big flag. I think there are very simple things like putting on too much weight, and that's a problem as well. I'm sure that that's a problem. And there are other sort of physical things you can watch for, but it's not what shouldn't be happening, because none of that should be happening. It's what should be happening.
Yeah.
Don't think about what you don't do. Think about what you do. Yeah. That's what can save lives. And you know, I've got friends. I've got one friend whose son killed himself, and you know, the boy hanged himself in the woods outside of East Sheen, where I live in London. And I know another boy who did the same. And it's terrifying to have a child who has an addiction. It is terrifying to think of your child being bullied either by a teacher or by school children. It's a terrifying, terrifying experience. But the key to this is always to keep talking.
Linda, are there any charities out there that support parents who have specifically this issue around addiction? You've mentioned earlier that it's only now, after 10 years, since you've been to the first addiction centre, cyber addiction centre in the Netherlands, that they're now having one here as well. But specifically related to the sort of the cyber and the online gaming, where would people go for help?
I think there are a couple of specialist charities, so they don't kind of spring to mind at the moment. So it is very difficult for people to get advice about this. But I would say, and this occurred to me when I was covering various stories, that of course it's about the specific addiction, but it could be drink, it could be drugs, it could be cigarettes, it could be a combination of all three, it could be gaming addiction, it could be anything.
Yes, that could be.
But it's not about the addiction, it's about what's causing it.
Yes.
And so I think it's better to go to the cause. Find a charity that supports empowering children. My friend runs the Girls Friendly Society, which is a 150-year-old charity which supports the empowerment of young girls. And I think it's important to go to that charity and find out what you can do to build a strong, resilient child. And they may then, if the problem already exists, they may be in a good place to divert you to the charities that can help you if there's a specific problem. But it's like, what did Sun Tzu say? The first rule of war: don't go. If you can avoid these problems with your children, and there are ways of doing that by building resilient children, that's the way to go.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And I think from a sort of cybersecurity perspective, there is the National Cybersecurity Centre. They have a very comprehensive website, and there's really a lot of advice around specifically how to keep your children safe online.
Yes.
So really check that out as well, because I mean,
that's a slightly different area.
Yes.
But really worth watching. Cybersecurity is very, 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 very important issue.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I kind of use cyber in the sense that we're online basically 24/7. We're connected 24/7 now. So there's obviously cyber risks that come with that, because the bad guys are always out to catch us, right?
Oh yeah, I do know. I know. I did a lot of valuable work with well, I hope it was with CEOPS, which is a Child Online Exploitation Protection Squad, and they. I don't know if that's not been absorbed into something else now, but they did do a lot of valuable work. So it's worth doing some research around them, because that's quite important.
Fantastic. Thank you. So what would be your sort of, key message? I think you've already shared so much gold in terms of, the connection. I think what stand out for me from what you said today is that connection that you build with your child, that from day one, and that open relationship, that open communication is so key. But what would you sort of say, to parents out there to inspire them, to give them hope?
Yeah, it's for those people contemplating being parents or with very young children, it's very simple. Just love your child. Love your child and bury your ego. And start building a line of communication, as we've discussed, Mary-Lise, because you will find that ultimately that is the lifesaver.
Thank you, Linda. That is ending on a very, very high note. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story today. Very courageous, a very big roar indeed today, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of parents out there. So I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary-Lise.